Have you ever stopped to wonder why the economy feels like it's teetering on the edge of a cliff these days, with consumer spending slowing down, tax revenues falling short, and entire industries that cater to traditional family structures suddenly scrambling for survival? What if I told you that a quiet revolution is underway? One driven not by politics or global events, but by millions of men simply choosing to walk away from the old script of marriage, endless spending on dates and families, and pouring their earnings into a system that no longer serves them. Stick with me through this entire breakdown because by the time we reach the end, you'll see irrefutable evidence that this shift isn't just personal. It's crashing the economy in ways that neither women nor the state can afford to ignore. And the numbers will shock you into rethinking everything you thought you knew about modern society. If you're fired up by real talk like this from the angry guy, smash that like button right now. Share this video with every man you know who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more no holds barred content that cuts through the noise. Also, if you're serious about taking control of your financial future in these uncertain times, head over to Angry's Crypto Academy, where I teach you step by step how to buy, sell, trade cryptocurrency, protect your assets from inflation and overreach, and build real wealth that no one can take from you. The link is in the description. Go check it out right now and start securing your freedom today. Let me paint a picture for you, because this isn't just some abstract theory. It's happening right now in real time, all around us. Imagine a world where men, for decades, have been told that their primary role is to provide, protect, and pay. Pay for dates, pay for engagement rings, pay for weddings that cost more than a house down payment, pay for houses that they might lose half of later, pay for children that the system can turn against them at any moment, and all the while keep consuming, keep spending, keep fueling an economy that's built on the assumption that men will never stop doing exactly that. That's the world we've been living in. But something has changed. Men are waking up. They're looking at the risks, the biases, the outright hostility stacked against them in family courts, in society, in the media, and they're saying no more. They're going their own way. They're walking away from marriage, from cohabitation, from the endless cycle of spending to impress or support women who have been empowered to take everything and give nothing in return if things go south. And when millions of men do this all at once, the ripple effects are massive. The economy doesn't just feel it, it starts to crack under the pressure. Let's start with the core statistic that should make everyone's jaw drop. Women control about 80% of all consumer spending in the economy. That's not hyperbole. That's straight from marketing research, economic reports, and consumer behavior studies that have been consistent for years. Women make the vast majority of purchasing decisions. They buy the clothes, the groceries, the home decor, the cars in many cases, the vacations, the kids stuff, and on and on. But here's where it gets interesting. Who funds the overwhelming majority of that spending? Men, through their labor, their taxes, their alimony, their child support, their willingness to take on overtime or dangerous jobs to keep the household running. Men pay roughly 80% of all taxes collected, again, not pulled out of thin air, but backed by income disparity data, where men dominate higher paying fields, work longer hours, and retire later precisely because they're carrying the financial load. Without men's earnings flowing into women's hands, either directly through relationships or indirectly through government redistribution, the whole consumer driven machine grinds to a halt. Think about it like this: for generations, the economy has been propped up by men's simping, men's providing, men's refusal to say no, even when the deck is stacked against them. A man meets a woman he spends on dates, gifts, trips to keep her happy. They move in together. He pays most or all of the rent because he earns more or because that's what men do. They get married. Boom, massive wedding industry cash infusion, mostly paid by him or his family. They have kids. He works himself to the bone while she decides whether to work or not. And even if she does, studies show men still cover the bulk of expenses. Then, if it all falls apart, and statistically, most divorces are initiated by women, he pays alimony, child support, loses assets, and starts over while she walks away with cash and prizes. That's the old model. That's what kept retail therapy alive, kept malls packed, kept Amazon deliveries constant, kept the housing market bubbling with family sized homes. But men are opting out. They're refusing to get on that hamster wheel, and suddenly women are left holding the bag with their own earnings, which on average are lower because of career choices, time off for kids, or simply not pushing as hard in negotiations, and the state is left scrambling because the tax base is shrinking. I want you to really let this sink in. Picture a single man who 10 years ago would have been married by now with a wife, two kids, a mortgage, car payments for her SUV, private schools, Disney vacations every year. That guy was a walking ATM for the economy. His money flowed out endlessly to jewelers, to florists, to restaurants, to clothing stores targeted at women and kids, to therapists when things got rocky, to lawyers when it ended. Multiply that by millions. Now picture that same man today. He's single, maybe lives in a modest apartment or even a van if he's extreme, invests in himself, travels cheap or not at all, buys what he needs and nothing more, stacks crypto or gold, lifts weights, pursues hobbies, and keeps his money in his own pocket. No ring, no wedding, no kids he doesn't want, no ex draining him monthly. That's freedom for him, but that's a disaster for an economy addicted to his spending. And the numbers bear this out in ways that the mainstream media desperately tries to ignore or spin. Marriage rates have been plummeting for years. In the US, they're at historic lows. Fewer men are even bothering with long term relationships. Birth rates are crashing below replacement levels in almost every developed country. Why? Because men are looking at the deal and saying it's rigged. Family courts award custody to mothers in the overwhelming majority of cases, even when they're not the better parent. Child support is enforced with jail time for men, but visitation is optional for women. False accusations can destroy a man's life with no consequences for the accuser. The culture shames men for wanting traditional roles while simultaneously demanding they pay for everything anyway. So men walk. They go MG Tao, men going their own way, or MWA, men walking away, as I like to call it. And every man who does this is like pulling a brick out of the wall that's holding up consumerism and big government. Let's talk about the housing market for a moment, because this is one of the clearest examples. Who do you think has been driving the demand for big suburban homes with white picket fences? Families, married couples with kids, men willing to take on 30-year mortgages to provide for a wife and children. But as men opt out of marriage, who's buying those McMansions? Single women? Sure, some are, but they can't afford them on single incomes in most cases, and many prefer condos or apartments closer to cities. Investors, they're buying, but that's creating bubbles, not stable growth. The result? Housing prices in family oriented areas start to stagnate or correct when demand dries up. Inventory sits longer, builders scale back. All the ancillary spending, furniture, appliances, landscaping takes a hit. And remember, women make 80% of home purchasing decisions, but they need a man's income or the state's redistribution to make it happen. No more provider husbands, no more endless upgrades and renovations funded by his bonus. Now, extend this to the auto industry. Women influence or make most car buying decisions, especially for family vehicles, minivans, SUVs, crossovers loaded with safety features and space for kids. But single men, they buy practical cars, trucks for work, or nothing at all if they use public transport or motorcycles. Many minimalist men don't even own cars anymore. Dealerships are feeling this. Luxury brands that targeted successful men providing for their families are shifting marketing because the demographic is shrinking. And don't get me started on the diamond industry and weddings. Hey guys, in a world pushing you to own nothing and be happy, crypto is your key to survival. Join Angry's Crypto Academy to master buying, selling, and trading crypto. Make huge profits and safeguard your wealth. Plus, discover the one crypto virtually no one is talking about, poised to create new millionaires in the upcoming bull run. The link is in the description of the video below. Go check it out now. De Beers built an empire, convincing men that they had to spend 3 months' salary on a rock to prove their love. Wedding industry? Over $50 billion a year in the US alone, mostly funded by men or their parents. Now, men are laughing at engagement rings. They're saying, why buy the cow when society gives the milk away for free and punishes you for trying to own the farm? Proposals are down. Extravagant weddings are becoming Instagram relics for the few who still play the game. Jewelers are panicking, trying to market self-love rings to women, but women aren't buying diamonds for themselves at the same rate men were forced to. This pattern repeats across sector after sector. Retail clothing. Women buy way more, but funded by men's credit cards or joint accounts. When men walk away, women have to live within their own means. Suddenly, fast fashion feels the pinch. Cosmetics, beauty salons, spas, all booming on the assumption of disposable income from relationships. Travel industry, couples and family vacations versus solo male travelers who backpack cheap or stay home gaming. Even entertainment, romantic comedies, and date night movies are bombing because single men aren't taking women to the theater anymore. But it goes deeper than consumer spending. Let's talk taxes, because this is where the state itself starts to tremble. Men pay the vast majority of income taxes because they earn more on average, not because of patriarchy, but because they work longer hours, take riskier jobs, negotiate harder, and don't take years off for childcare. Men dominate fields like construction, oil rigs, logging, mining, trucking, dangerous high pay jobs that women largely avoid. Men are the overwhelming majority of overtime workers, entrepreneurs, starting businesses that employ others and generate taxable revenue. When men check out, work just enough to live comfortably, minimize taxes legally, go off grid or expatriate, the government's coffers dry up fast. Governments love big government because they can tax men's productivity and redistribute it to women and children through welfare, food stamps, housing assistance, free school lunches, Medicaid expansions, all programs used disproportionately by single mothers. Who do you think funds Section 8 housing, WIC, child tax credits? Men who are married or single and working hard. But as men say no thanks to the provider role, more women end up as single mothers relying on the state, and fewer men are generating the surplus taxes needed to pay for it all. It's a death spiral. Politicians promise more benefits to women to secure their votes. Women vote more reliably and in the blocks for handouts. But without men's taxes, it's unsustainable. Look at countries like Japan or South Korea, where men have been walking away en masse for longer. Birth rates in free fall, economy stagnating, governments desperately trying incentives that men ignore because the risks still outweigh the rewards. This isn't about hating women. Let's be crystal clear on that. This is about men finally prioritizing themselves after decades of being told their value is only in what they provide to others. Women were sold empowerment. Go to college, delay marriage, focus on career, sleep around in your prime years, then settle down later with a high value man who will accept your past and pay for your future. But men aren't settling anymore. They're seeing the game for what it is and refusing to play. The result? Women in their 30s and 40s wondering where all the good men went, while those men are peacefully living their best lives, free from drama and financial exploitation. And the economy feels every step they take away from the plantation. The truth is, most women never had to face the cold reality of living on their own earnings alone, because there was always a man somewhere in the chain picking up the tab, either a husband, a boyfriend, an ex husband through alimony and child support, or the ultimate beta provider, the state, funded predominantly by other men's taxes. That invisible pipeline of male money has been the real engine behind female economic independence for the last 50 years. Cut the pipeline and the independence evaporates overnight. That's exactly what's happening right now. And the panic you're starting to hear from economists, politicians, and single women in their late 30s is the sound of the pipeline springing leaks in 1,000 places at once. Let me tell you a story that illustrates this perfectly. I knew a guy named Mark, solid guy, engineer, made low six figures straight out of college. Met a girl in his mid 20s. She was a part time yoga instructor with a communications degree and a mountain of student debt. Classic story. They dated for 3 years. He paid for every vacation, every dinner out, every concert ticket. He co signed her new car because her credit was shot. When they got engaged, he dropped 25 grand on a ring and another 60 on a wedding that looked great on Instagram. Bought a 4 bedroom house in the suburbs because we might want kids someday. She worked here and there, but never more than 25 hours a week because the job stressed her out. He covered the mortgage, the utilities, the groceries, the health insurance, the Disney Plus subscription, the Peloton, all of it. 2 years in, she decided she wasn't happy anymore. Filed for divorce, took the dog, half the savings, the newer car, and walked away with no fault cash and prizes while he got to keep the mortgage and the memory of being called toxic in open court. Mark now lives in a 1 bedroom apartment, drives a 10-year-old Civic, invests 40% of his income in crypto and index funds, travels to Thailand twice a year for a month at a time, and hasn't been on a single date in 4 years. He's happier than he's ever been. Multiply Mark by 10 million, and you begin to understand why retail chains are closing stores, why tax revenues are missing projections, and why birth rates look like a ski slope. That's one man, one data point. But the data points are now in the tens of millions and growing every single day. And look at what's happening to the luxury handbag market. Brands like Louis Vuitton, Gucci, Chanel, they built entire empires on men buying $6,000 purses for girlfriends and wives to signal status. Go on any MWA forum right now and you'll see screenshots of guys laughing at the idea of ever buying a woman a Birkin again. The secondary market for luxury bags is flooded because women who got them as gifts are dumping them to pay bills, and there's little new male money coming in to replace it. Department stores that used to bank on the husband waiting board while wife shops dynamic are boarding up cosmetics counters. Entire malls built in the 90s and 2000s are turning into ghost towns because the traditional family shopping trip is dying with the traditional family. And please don't hit me with the women earn their own money now line. Yes, some women do. The top 10%, the corporate lawyers, the dermatologists, the tech leads, sure, they earn great money, but the overwhelming majority of women still earn significantly less than men in comparable roles, still choose lower paying fields like education, HR, and healthcare administration, still take years off for children, and still expect a man whose income is higher than theirs when they do decide to settle down. The median full-time female worker in the United States earns roughly 82 cents for every dollar a man earns. And that gap widens dramatically when you account for total lifetime earnings and time out of the workforce. That's not oppression, that's choice. But those choices were sustainable only as long as there was a greater male fool waiting at the end of the ride to pick up the difference. Remove the greater male fool, and the math no longer works. Nowhere is this clearer than in the explosive growth of OnlyFans and similar platforms. When men stopped spending $200 a night Taking a girl out for drinks and apps, a huge chunk of women pivoted to monetizing male loneliness directly through the screen. It's the same transaction, just more efficient and with lower risk for the woman. She doesn't even have to leave her couch. But here's the dirty secret the mainstream won't tell you. Even OnlyFans is starting to plateau. Why? Because men are walking away from that too. They're realizing that paying for pixelated attention is just the digital version of the same losing game. Subscription cancellations are through the roof. Top creators are publicly panicking about wallet fatigue. The smart ones are trying to lock in a few high value whales with marriage talk before the whales figure out the game and swim away for good. But most men already have. The average spender on those platforms is getting older, not younger. The next generation of men isn't signing up to be pay pigs. They're lifting, stacking sats, and laughing at the idea of simping in any form. Let's talk about the restaurant industry for a minute. Fine dining, mid tier chains, even fast casual, all of it was subsidized by men taking women out. First dates, anniversaries, Valentine's Day, just because nights. The list goes on. A single man eats steak and eggs at home for $8 or orders a pizza for 20. A man with a girlfriend or wife is dropping 150 minimum every Friday night plus Uber and drinks. Multiply that by 52 weeks a year times millions of men. That's real money that just vanished from the economy when men decided Applebee's wasn't part of their life plan anymore. Chains are closing locations left and right. Servers who used to make bank on tips from couples are now fighting over tables of guys who split a pitcher and leave exact change. The industry is in free fall, and nobody in the corporate media wants to say the quiet part out loud. The dating market collapse is killing casual dining. And it's not just dining. Look at the collapse of the movie theater date. Remember when taking a girl to the movies was the default Tuesday night activity? Popcorn, soda, tickets, easily 60 to $100 for a 2-hour rom-com neither of you particularly wanted to see. Men today watch everything at home on a 75-inch OLED they bought for themselves, or they go with their boys and split the cost of wings. The romantic comedy genre is all but dead at the box office because the primary audience, single men taking women out, simply doesn't exist in the same numbers anymore. Studios are desperate. They keep trying to market to women directly, but women don't go to the theater alone or in large enough groups to replace the lost male funded date nights. Result? $1 billion flops and a streaming war nobody can win. Now let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture. Government spending and the coming debt crisis. The modern welfare state was built on the assumption that there would always be a large cohort of high earning men who would never stop working 60-hour weeks to support families and therefore could be taxed at ever higher rates to fund benefits for everyone else. That cohort is evaporating. Men are downshifting. They're working just enough to cover a modest lifestyle, maximizing tax advantaged accounts, moving to low tax states or even low tax countries, and refusing to climb the corporate ladder if it means golden handcuffs and a 50% divorce risk at the end. The result is a shrinking tax base supporting an expanding dependent class. Politicians keep promising Scandinavian level benefits, but Scandinavia had an incredibly homogeneous, high trust, high work ethic male population that no longer exists in the same form anywhere in the West. You can't import replacement taxpayers fast enough to make the math work when native men check out, and the replacements often consume more in services than they pay in taxes, at least in the first generation or two. We're already seeing the cracks. Social Security trust funds are projected to run dry years earlier than expected. Medicare costs are exploding because boomers didn't have as many kids to support them in old age. And the kids they did have are increasingly supported by the state themselves. State pension systems in places like Illinois and California are one market crash away from total insolvency. Politicians respond by floating ideas like wealth taxes, financial transaction taxes, raising corporate rates, anything to squeeze more blood from a stone that's already giving less every year. But you can't tax men who have minimized their taxable income, moved assets offshore, or simply stopped producing surplus in the first place. You can threaten, you can shame, you can call them immature or insecure or whatever the flavor of the month insult is, but you can't force a man to care about a system that hates him. I want you to imagine what happens when the men who keep the lights on collectively decide the juice isn't worth the squeeze. The men who maintain the power grid, who fix the pipelines, who drive the trucks, who code the software, who pay the disproportionate taxes. What happens when enough of them say, not my problem anymore? We're not there yet, but we're closer than most people realize. Entire online communities are dedicated to teaching men how to legally drop their taxable income below the threshold where the government can really hurt them. They're learning about geo arbitrage, perpetual traveler flags, crypto privacy tools, second passports, all of it. The state's response so far has been to double down on propaganda telling men they're losers if they don't wife up single mothers and get back on the plantation. That's like trying to stop a prison break by telling the escapees they'll never find love outside the walls. Men are voting with their feet and their wallets, and the economy is feeling every step. The most poetic part of all this, women still hold the majority of the voting power. They can and do vote themselves more benefits, more programs, more equity initiatives that amount to wealth transfer from men to women. But votes don't create wealth, only production does. And the producers are walking away. At some point, the math catches up, the credit card gets declined, the EBT balance hits zero. The pension check bounces, and on that day there will be a lot of very confused people wondering where all the money went, unable to comprehend that it didn't disappear. It simply stopped being handed over by men who finally learned the meaning of the word no. We're already seeing the preview in real time. Look at the rise of high value men discourse among women in their late 30s and 40s. They're openly angry that the men they ignored in their 20s didn't wait around holding a golden ticket for when they were finally ready to cash in. They're writing articles, making TikToks, going on podcasts, demanding to know, where have all the good men gone? The answer is simple. Those men woke up, leveled up, and walked away from a game that was rigged from the start. They're on beaches in Thailand, in gyms in Texas, in home offices stacking Bitcoin, in vans crossing national parks, living lives of quiet abundance while the system that expected their lifelong sacrifice slowly starves without them. And the best part? It's peaceful. There are no protests, no violence, no demands. Just millions of individual men making the same quiet decision. My time, my money, my future, my rules. That's the most powerful revolution in history because there is no leader to arrest, no organization to infiltrate, no manifesto to debunk, just a distributed, decentralized opt out that's crashing the old order one decline date, one skipped proposal, one unsigned marriage license at a time. The irony is thick enough to choke on when you listen to the talking heads on television wringing their hands about consumer confidence being low, about retail sales missing expectations for the eighth quarter in a row, about why young people aren't buying homes or having children like their parents did. They blame inflation, they blame interest rates, they blame social media, they blame avocado toast, anything except the 800-pound gorilla sitting in the middle of the room. Millions of men have quietly seceded from the economic script that was written for them decades ago. They're not burning the system down with torches and pitchforks. They're starving it to death, one withheld dollar at a time. And the system never saw it coming because the system genuinely believed men had no choice, that male thirst and male duty were infinite resources that could be tapped forever without consequence. Turns out those resources were finite after all, and the meter just hit zero. Let me take you through a few more industries that are feeling the cold breeze of men walking away because the dominoes are still falling and most people haven't even noticed the first ones are already on the ground. First, higher education. Colleges and universities have been riding a 50-year boom built on two assumptions. One, that women would flood into campuses to get the degrees that would make them independent. And two, that men would keep showing up right behind them, either to chase those newly empowered women or because a degree was marketed as the only path to being a good provider for a future family. Both assumptions are now collapsing at the same time. Women still go to college in droves. In fact, they're now almost 60% of enrollees, but the men are vanishing. Male enrollment has been dropping for a decade straight. Why slave away for a gender studies adjacent degree that costs $250,000 when you know the dating market on campus is a dumpster fire and the job market waiting on the other side doesn't guarantee you'll ever out earn the debt? Men are opting for trades, for coding boot camps, for entrepreneurship, for crypto, for content creation, anything that doesn't require 4 to 8 years of ideological indoctrination and financial servitude. The result? Entire liberal arts departments are facing budget shortfalls because there simply aren't enough warm male bodies to fill the seats and subsidize the system. Universities are now desperately trying to recruit men with esports scholarships, free gym memberships, anything they can think of, but the damage is done. The male enrollment cliff is here, and every percentage point drop represents billions of dollars that just evaporated from the higher ed complex. Those ivory towers were built on male tuition dollars and male willingness to go into debt to become marriage material. Remove that willingness and the towers start to lean. Next, let's talk about the healthcare industry, specifically the parts that cater almost exclusively to women and children. Pediatricians, obstetricians, gynecologists, fertility clinics, the entire mommy medicine industrial complex. Guess who was paying for all of that? Men were, either directly through insurance plans they carried for their families or indirectly through the taxes that fund Medicaid and CHIP programs used overwhelmingly by single mothers. As men opt out of marriage and fatherhood, the patient base for all of these specialties starts to shrink. Fewer births mean fewer well baby checkups, fewer vaccinations, fewer braces, fewer pediatric specialists needed. Fertility clinics are already seeing a strange paradox. Demand from aging career women is through the roof, but the supply of donor sperm from high quality men is drying up because young men have figured out that anonymously donating genetic material that could come back to haunt them 18 years later with child support claims is a terrible deal. Some countries like Denmark and Canada have outright sperm shortages now because men are refusing to donate. The entire IVF industry, which was supposed to be the backup plan for women who focused on career first and family later, is facing a raw material crisis because the raw material finally said no. Even the pet industry is getting hammered in ways most people don't connect to this trend. Who do you think adopted the fur baby phenomenon hardest? Childless or divorced women replacing human children with dogs and cats that they dress up, push in strollers, and spend thousands on. And who was originally footing the bill for a lot of that? Either the ex husband through alimony or the new boyfriend who got guilt tripped into paying for organic dog food and designer collars. Now that fewer men are playing Captain Save a Pet, the industry is having to pivot hard to women paying with their own money. And guess what? The money just isn't there at the same scale. High-end pet stores are closing, subscription box services for pets are hemorrhaging customers, and veterinarians are warning of an impending oversupply of clinics because the explosive growth everyone projected was built on an endless supply of male-funded substitute children. Now, let's get into something that should terrify every politician in the Western world: the coming collapse of municipal bond markets and local government finances. Cities and states have been borrowing like drunken sailors for decades, confident they could repay the debt because property taxes and sales taxes would keep rolling in from suburban families with 2.5 kids and a 30-year mortgage. Those families are not being replaced. As men walk away from marriage, the birth rate craters, schools start closing for lack of students, property values in family centric neighborhoods stagnate or decline, and the tax base shrinks while pension obligations for retired public workers remain fixed. Look at what's already happening in places like Detroit, Chicago, Stockton, cities that were early canaries in the coal mine. They're raising taxes, cutting services, watching police and fire departments atrophy, all because the traditional family that paid the freight is disappearing faster than they can replace it with immigration or gimmicks. And the bond market knows it. Municipal bond defaults, which were almost unheard of for 50 years, are starting to creep back into the conversation. When the first big city defaults because there simply aren't enough married men left to tax into oblivion, the shockwave will make 2008 look like a warm up act. And spare me the immigration will save us cope. First generation immigrants, especially from cultures that still value family, do tend to have higher birth rates, but within one generation, those rates converge to the native average or below as the daughters get the same messaging about career first, kids later, or never. Plus, low skill immigration tends to be a net fiscal drain for decades, consuming far more in services than they pay in taxes, especially when you factor in the children. The state needs high earning, high tax paying men who don't use many services. That profile has historically been native born or highly selected immigrants who assimilate into the provider role. Both pools are shrinking at the exact moment the liabilities are exploding. Math doesn't care about feelings or political promises. Look overseas for a preview of the end game. Japan has been dealing with this for 30 years. Their men started walking away first, the herbivore men phenomenon, where young guys simply refused to date, marry, or even pursue sex because the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. Result? An economy that has essentially flatlined for 3 decades, a debt to GDP ratio that should have caused hyperinflation, but hasn't, only because the Japanese people still save and the world trusts the yen. For now, stores close, rural towns turn into ghost villages. The government begs women to have children and offers laughable incentives that no one takes because the underlying deal is still terrible for men. South Korea is following the same path at triple speed. Their birth rate is now under 0.7 children per woman, the lowest ever recorded anywhere. Young Korean men are done. They call it the 4B movement on the male side. No dating, no marriage, no sex, no children. And the government is in full panic mode, talking about drafting women into the military and taxing single men extra just to try and force them back into the harness. Good luck with that. Italy, Spain, Greece, same story. Southern Europe is depopulating so fast that entire regions are facing the prospect of zero children being born in the next decade. The EU keeps kicking the can down the road with more debt and more promises, but at some point, the bond markets will say no. And when that happens, the currency itself could fracture, all because men looked at the deal, looked at the risks, looked at the cultural contempt aimed at them, and quietly walked away. Back home in the United States, we're maybe 10 to 15 years behind Japan, but the trajectory is identical. The only thing that has masked the decline so far is massive deficit spending and money printing. The federal government has been able to paper over the shrinking tax base by borrowing trillions and having the Fed buy the debt. But that trick has a shelf life. Interest on the national debt is already the fastest growing budget item, larger than defense spending. And we're not even at Japan levels of mail withdrawal yet. When the next recession hits and a critical mass of men decide that hustling 80 hours a week just to pay half their income in taxes to a system that hates them isn't worth it anymore, the whole house of cards starts to teeter. I want you to really think about what comes after that. When the state can no longer borrow at low rates because the world finally realizes there's no growth coming from a population that's aging and shrinking with no replacement, interest rates spike, the dollar weakens, imports get expensive, inflation roars back, and suddenly all those benefits that were promised become impossible to deliver. Single mothers who were told, you don't need a man, the government will take care of you, discover that the government was only able to play daddy because real daddies were being forced to pay the bill. When real daddies opt out en masse, substitute daddy goes bankrupt. And here's the part nobody wants to say out loud: women will be hit hardest by this collapse, not because of some cosmic justice, but because of simple economics. Women consume more than they produce in aggregate. That's not an insult. It's a statistical reality backed by decades of labor participation data, tax data, and consumption studies. As long as men were willing to act as net providers, the system worked, sort of. Remove the net providers, and the system cannibalizes itself. We're already seeing the early stages. Women in their 40s and 50s with no savings, no partner, no children, realizing that Social Security might not be there when they retire. That renting forever on a teacher's salary or HR manager's salary isn't sustainable. That the cats can't call 911 when they fall in the bathtub. The regret is going to be biblical. But here's the thing most people still don't get. Men aren't coming back. You can't shame them back. You can't tax them back. You can't threaten them back. The knowledge is out there now. The red pill has been swallowed by an entire generation. They've seen the divorce statistics. They've watched their fathers, brothers, and friends get destroyed in family court. They've read the horror stories on forums and subreddits. They've learned about crypto, about geo arbitrage, about minimalism, about lifting, about building a life that doesn't depend on the approval or presence of a woman who can walk away with everything tomorrow. That genie is not going back in the bottle. The only thing that could reverse this trend would be a complete overhaul of family law, of cultural messaging, of economic incentives, basically a return to reality based arrangements where men aren't punished for building families. But that would require admitting that the last 50 years of social policy were a disaster for men and for society as a whole. And the people in charge would literally rather watch the entire system burn than utter those words. So they won't. They'll double down, triple down, call men every name in the book, and watch helplessly as the most productive half of the population continues its slow, deliberate, unstoppable walk away from the plantation. And when the final collapse comes, when the grocery store shelves are thin, when the power flickers, when the EBT cards stop working, and the pension checks bounce, a lot of people are going to ask, how did this happen? The answer will be simple. Men stopped caring and everything else followed. We're not at the end yet. We're not even at the end of the beginning. But make no mistake, the process is irreversible at this point. Every day, another 1,000 men wake up, look around, and decide that peace of mind is worth more than a white picket fence and a woman who might destroy them on a whim. Every day, the economy loses a little more of the fuel it was built to run on. And every day, the people in charge get a little more desperate, a little more shrill, a little more willing to threaten and coerce because deep down they know the truth. Without men's willing participation, neither women nor the state can survive. So to every man watching this right now, keep walking, keep building, keep stacking, keep lifting, keep laughing. Your peace is the most powerful weapon you have, and it's already bringing the whole rotten structure to its knees. What did you think about all of this? Do you see the same trends in your city, your industry, your friend group? Are you one of the men who's already walking away, or are you still on the fence? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Like the video if you liked it. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you liked the video, share the video. And just remember that all roads lead to MWA, men walking away, and cheers.
Nothing says you care like crypto. Nothing can compare. Nothing says you care like crypto. Oh, nothing can compare to crypto.